I want you to picture a skyscraper in a coastal city, just bracing for a Category 5 hurricane.
Oh, wow. Okay, setting the scene.
Right. So you've got like 100-mile-an-hour winds, flying debris, just this immense wall of kinetic energy slamming into the structure. Now, when the storm clears, one building is basically a pile of shattered glass and twisted steel.
Right.
But the building right next door, which was hit by the exact same wind, is standing tall. Maybe it's just swaying gently. And you have to ask, why? I mean, the storm was identical.
Exactly. The weather didn't change.
Yeah. The difference is the invisible engineering inside the walls, the mass dampers, the flexibility of the steel, the depth of the foundation. The wind didn't actually destroy the first building.
Right. The first building's internal physics just failed to process the wind.
Exactly. And that is a perfect way to frame what we are looking at today on this deep dive, because when we study history, or even when we just look at the news right now, we have this terrible habit of only staring at the hurricane.
We really do. We obsess over the external force.
Yeah.
Like the size of the invading army, or the economic shock, or the rival nation.
Yeah, but the secret to survival almost always lies in the architectural integrity of the society itself.
Which is such a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. So that brings us to the centerpiece of today's deep dive. We are digging into a stack of chapters outlining this analytical framework called the Diamond. It's a model for understanding how civilizations, institutions, and even corporations operate as like cyclical living systems.
Yeah, living systems is the key phrase there.
Right. And our mission today is to zero in on Chapter 7 specifically. We want to understand how societies navigate external pressures. You know, the friends they make, the enemies they fight across their entire life cycles.
Yeah, and before we can even touch the concepts of friends and enemies, I think we need to make sure you, the listener, can actually visualize this framework.
Good call.
So it's called the Diamond because it identifies 4 distinct spheres of a society that have to connect and reinforce each other.
Let's lay this out really clearly. What are the 4 points of the diamond?
Okay, so at the top you have the political sphere. This is, how power and legitimacy are distributed. Then you have the economic sphere, how resources are generated and allocated.
Makes sense.
The third point is the environmental and physical security sphere. So your geographic realities, your defense, and finally at the bottom, the social sphere. This is the cultural values, the trust, the demographics of the people.
Right, the actual people.
Exactly. And when those 4 points are tightly aligned and communicating with each other, you have what the text calls the ultimate center of gravity, which is community coherence.
Community coherence. Okay. Meaning the internal systems of a society aren't just functioning in like silos. They are actively supporting one another. The economy serves the society, the politics manage the environment, and so on.
Yeah, they're interlocked. And here's the radical shift in perspective that this text offers. That internal coherence completely dictates whether an external force destroys a society or actually makes it stronger. Yeah, because we usually think of a society as a passive object getting hit by an external hammer, right? But the Diamond framework argues that your internal state determines whether that hammer acts as a weapon that shatters you or a tool that forges you into something stronger.
I love that analogy, but to really grasp how that works in practice, the authors say we first have to perform a bit of a mental cleanse, I guess you could call it.
Well, absolutely.
We have to strip away all the emotional kind of superhero movie morality that we usually attach to the words enemy and friend, which is a heady lift.
It's super hard, yeah. Those words carry so much baggage.
Right. We naturally want to see enemies as the bad guys who want to ruin everything and friends as the benevolent good guys.
We do, but the Diamond framework insists on strictly structural definitions. It basically treats friends and enemies as operational forces, entirely devoid of moral judgment.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. So in this model, an enemy is simply defined as an external force that acts as and this is a quote, accelerator of internal disorder. That's it.
An accelerator of internal disorder.
Right. It's any system whose incentives undermine your system's stability, regardless of their actual intentions.
And friends?
Friends are defined as stabilizers. They are external actors who supply, trade, institutional knowledge, or even just a healthy baseline of competitive pressure that helps keep your internal diamond functioning smoothly.
Okay, so thinking about this structurally, I immediately went to the human body. Think of a society like your own physical immune system, right?
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. So an enemy in this framework is essentially an opportunistic infection. Like, a virus isn't plotting evil against you.
No, it doesn't have a vendetta.
Right, it's just operating on its own structural incentives to replicate. But whether it becomes a life-threatening crisis depends entirely on your body's internal community coherence.
Yeah, exactly.
If you are well-rested and healthy, your immune system fights it off, and you probably build better antibodies as a result. The virus actually made you stronger. But if you're exhausted, malnourished, and your systems are failing,
Then that exact same virus accelerates your internal disorder and puts you in the hospital.
exactly.
And, the human body is the perfect proxy for this. In fact, the text provides a brilliant historical autopsy that validates that exact analogy, looking at late Rome.
Oh man, late Rome is the ultimate case study here. Because the popular narrative is just so deeply entrenched, everyone assumes Rome fell because the barbarians finally got strong enough to knock the gates down.
Right. The Goths and the Vandals get all the credit in the history books for destroying the Roman Empire in the 4th and 5th centuries. But the Diamond framework points out that Rome's most fatal enemies were not external at all.
The call was coming from inside the house.
Literally. The real rot was entirely inside the walls.
Break down the mechanics of that rot for us, if you would. How did the 4 points of Rome's diamond actually disconnect?
Well, it was a cascading failure. Let's just look at the economic and social spheres first. We had massive administrative overstretch,
Right.
which led to a crushing tax burden. But the wealthy elites, the large landowners, essentially found loopholes. They retreated to these massive country estates and used their political influence to avoid paying taxes entirely.
Wow. So they just opted out of the system.
Yeah, so the tax burden fell completely on the middle and lower classes, and that hollowed out local governance and just destroyed social trust.
So the political sphere lost its legitimacy because it was clearly only serving the elites.
Exactly. And that forced a failure in the security sphere. Because the treasury was depleted by all that tax evasion, Rome couldn't afford to field a citizen army anymore.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. They became heavily dependent on hiring mercenaries, often the very Germanic tribes they were supposed to be defending against.
Right.
So by the time the major external attacks happened, the internal diamond was already shattered. The political sphere was corrupt, the economy was stagnant, and societal trust was basically non-existent.
The immune system was completely shot. The Goths were just the opportunistic infection that took advantage of a host that was already dying from internal organ failure.
It's a really sobering realization, honestly. Civilizations are rarely murdered. They usually die of chronic internal lifestyle diseases, and the enemy just happens to be the thing that pushes them over the edge at the very end.
Which introduces a really fascinating progression in the text.
Yeah.
Because if an enemy only destroys a society when it's internally weak, then a society's relationship with the outside world must change as it grows up and ages, right?
Oh, completely.
And a civilization is a living thing, so it's highly dynamic.
Right. And the diamond outlines 4 distinct civilizational stages. You've got roots, which is birth and identity building. Rise, where you see the expansion of capacity through restraints. Peak, the era of maturity and stability. And finally, decline or renewal, where a society either loses its competence or manages to reestablish its coherence.
Okay, got it.
And at every single one of those stages, the way a system interacts with external pressures shifts dramatically.
Let's trace that life cycle, starting with the root stage. This is like the infancy of a society where everything is about consolidating an identity and just trying to survive.
Yeah. And at the root stage, a civilization is incredibly fragile. A strong external enemy can easily wipe it out before it even has a chance to build its diamond. But, and this is key, this is also the stage where external friends can be deeply stabilizing.
And the source uses post-colonial Botswana as a prime example of getting this right, don't they?
They do, and it's such a good example.
I found that part fascinating because they faced the classic resource curse. They discovered massive diamond reserves shortly after independence. And in so many emerging nations, that kind of sudden wealth completely breaks the internal diamond.
Oh, yeah. The political sphere becomes corrupt. The social sphere fractures into civil war over the money.
Exactly, and external forces just come in to exploit the chaos.
But Botswana managed the mechanics of it brilliantly. Their early leadership, particularly Seretse, focused entirely on internal coherence first.
They prioritized the foundation.
Right. They adapted traditional consensus-building systems, the Kogatla, and integrated them into a modern democratic parliament. They made sure the economic sphere served the social sphere by pouring mining revenues into national infrastructure, education, and healthcare. rather than just enriching a small elite.
So they basically built the internal architecture before letting the outside world in too far.
They did. And because that internal diamond was rock solid, their external partnerships, their negotiations with foreign mining conglomerates and their diplomatic ties acted as massive stabilizers. The foreign investment didn't corrupt them. It funded their development.
It allowed them to successfully transition into the next stage.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the rise stage, or what the text calls the stage of restraints. This is where a society is expanding its capacity, but doing so requires intense discipline. And here is where the concept of the enemy gets turned completely on its head.
Yeah, it really does. During the rise stage, enemies are not just manageable. They are often necessary. They provide what the framework calls constructive pressure.
It's like resistance training for a society. You don't build muscle by lifting air, right? You need gravity pushing against you.
That's a perfect way to put it. And the quintessential example here is South Korea from the 1960s to the 1980s. You have a nation trying to industrialize while facing an intense, literal existential threat from North Korea right on its border.
Plus general regional instability during the Cold War.
Right.
Most people would look at that and say that level of external pressure is going to crush them.
But South Korea was internally disciplined. They channeled the terror of that external threat into hyper-focused industrial policy.
Wow.
Yeah, the state-directed capitalism through massive conglomerates, the K-Bulls. They linked the social and security spheres through mandatory military service, creating a highly unified, educated, and disciplined workforce.
Because they had to.
Exactly. The constant threat of North Korea meant they couldn't afford the kind of lazy corruption that decays a system. They had to be efficient to survive.
They basically took the kinetic energy of the hurricane and used it to power their own grid.
That is exactly what they did.
They used the constructive pressure of their adversary, alongside the stabilization of their friends, like the U.S. security umbrella, to forge immense capability. It's wild to think that they reached their peak stage not in spite of the adversary pressure, but partly because they harnessed it.
Which naturally leads us to the peak stage. This is maturity, maximum stability, and the highest level of resilience. At the peak, the internal diamond is so strong that enemies are easily manageable, and friends are deeply interdependent.
Okay.
And the most vivid example the text gives for a civilization moving through peak and then sliding into decline is the post-WWII Western Alliance, specifically the relationship between the U.S. and Western Europe.
See, this part of the source material was a real light bulb moment for me, because if you grew up in the West, you tend to view that alliance as this permanent, unbreakable law of physics.
Right. But for several decades, it functioned as what the text calls a mutually reinforcing diamond.
How did that look across the four spheres?
Well, let's look at it during that peak in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah.
You had shared political institutions rooted in liberal democracy.
Yeah.
You had heavily interconnected economics anchored by the Bretton Woods system.
Right.
You had environmental and physical security guaranteed by NATO, and social alignment through a rising, prosperous middle class in both regions. All four spheres were locked in and reinforcing each other across the Atlantic.
But the diamond is cyclical. It doesn't stay at the peak forever. And the text notes a profound shift starting around the 1980s and accelerating into the 90s and 2000s. We start seeing deindustrialization in the West.
Yep.
The economic sphere becomes dominated by financialization, sort of decoupling from the actual production of goods. You get massive debt growth, diverging energy policies, and rising social polarization as the working class gets hollowed out.
The internal coherence of the Western Diamond just started to fray. The spheres stopped talking to each other. The economic policies were no longer supporting the social stability. And this leads to a vital, almost counterintuitive principle in the framework. Friends are stabilizing only when your internal coherence is maintained.
Okay, I have to pause here and look at this from the listener's perspective, because this feels like a paradox, you know? How can a friend stop being a stabilizer if the friend hasn't actually done anything different? Like, the treaties are the same, the trade deals are the same. Why does the relationship suddenly become a liability?
Think about the mechanics of a free trade agreement. During the peak stage, when your society has a robust manufacturing base, strong labor protections, high social trust, a free trade agreement with a friendly nation is a massive stabilizer.
It lowers prices, opens new markets, boosts wealth.
Exactly. But fast forward to the decline stage,
Right.
and your internal capacity to adapt has degraded. If your education system is failing to retrain workers, and your political system is too polarized to pass a social safety net, that exact same free trade agreement suddenly acts as an accelerator of disorder.
Oh, I see.
It accelerates the loss of domestic jobs. It fuels populist anger. A security alliance like NATO, which used to feel like a shared shield, suddenly feels, to parts of the population, like an expensive, entangling burden.
Because the society can't handle the obligations anymore.
Right. The external input, the friend, didn't become malicious. Your system simply lost the metabolic ability to process the relationship in a healthy way.
That is wild. A declining society reaches a point where it can't even digest its own friendships properly. And this internal fragility doesn't just ruin alliances. It actually causes a society to hallucinate enemies where there used to be healthy competition.
Hallucinating enemies is the perfect phrase for it. When a civilization loses its internal coherence, its primary casualty is the ability to manage complexity. And the modern world is nothing but complexity, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you can't manage it, everything external starts to look like a targeted threat.
The text unpacks this dynamic beautifully by looking at the relationship between Japan and the West, specifically the U.S., in the 1970s and 1980s. Japan's economy was experiencing a meteoric rise, and they were producing highly efficient, affordable cars and electronics. It created intense competitive pressure globally.
And if you look closely at how the West reacted, you see a perfect split based on internal health.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the healthy, internally coherent sectors of the Western economy, let's say, emerging tech in Silicon Valley or high-end specialized manufacturing, they looked at Japan and adapted. They innovated.
Stepped up to the plate.
Right. They treated Japan as a fierce competitor, and that constructive pressure forced them to upgrade their own processes.
But then you look at the weakened sectors, like look at Detroit's legacy automakers during that exact same era. They had become complacent. They had lost their internal discipline, their capacity to learn and refine.
Because adapting would require painful internal reform. It would require changing how they managed labor, how they designed cars, how they compensated executives.
It's too much work.
Right. So instead of doing the hard work of competing, they demanded protectionism. You literally had PR stunts where auto workers were taking sledgehammers to Japanese cars in parking lots.
I remember seeing pictures of that.
Yeah. They painted Japan not as a competitor offering a better product, but as an evil enemy trying to destroy the American way of life. A society in decline sees enemies everywhere because it interprets its own failure to adapt as an external attack.
It's so much easier to smash a Toyota with a hammer than it is to re-engineer your entire corporate structure.
Exactly.
So what does this mean for the world we are walking into today? Let's connect this directly to the 21st century. We are clearly living through a massive global transition. We're moving away from a unipolar, West-led order into a really messy, multipolar world.
Oh, completely.
We have the rise of China, India, emerging regional blocs in the global south, and supply chains that are completely fragmenting.
It is a radically different geopolitical board. But the Diamond Framework argues that the core challenge of the 21st century is not actually the existence of these new powers.
It's not.
No. Multipolarity is just a structural reality. It's the weather. It places immense pressure on politics, economics, the environment, and society.
It's the hurricane outside the skyscraper.
Exactly. The framework insists that the real issue is the internal coherence of the systems facing that multipolarity. Can our political institutions maintain legitimacy when economic growth slows down?
All right.
Can our economies design resilient supply chains that aren't solely dependent on cheap overseas labor? Can our societies maintain basic civic trust? If our internal diamond processes are functioning, if we are aware, accountable, and adaptable, then we can navigate this new world.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second here, because I know there is a nagging thought in the back of a lot of people's minds right now.
Sure, lay it on me.
Is it really, honestly, never about the external threat? This framework sounds incredibly inwardly focused, almost to the point of victim blaming a society if it gets wiped out. What if the army outside the fortress is just overwhelmingly, unimaginably huge? Let's say Genghis Khan shows up at your borders. Can't a massive external force break a completely healthy system?
That is a crucial distinction, and the authors of the Diamond text definitely address it. The framework does differentiate between manageable threats and true exogenous shocks.
Okay, good.
Yes, in theory, a literal meteor striking the Earth or an overwhelmingly asymmetrical military force like the Mongol Empire can destroy a healthy, coherent society.
But how often does that actually happen?
Historically speaking,
Yeah.
extremely rarely. The existential threats that actually cause a civilization to collapse are almost always the ones that exploit existing internal fragility. We're talking about rampant corruption, bureaucratic incompetence, deep institutional decay. Right, the rot. Healthy civilizations can absorb and navigate immense external pressures. Trade wars, diplomatic crises, even regional conflicts. They might take heavy damage, they might lose territory, but they don't systemically collapse. Systemic collapse is almost always an inside job first.
The virus only kills the patient if the immune system is already surrendered.
Yes, and that explains the paranoia we see in declining societies today. A system in decline knows, on a subconscious level, that it no longer has the internal strength to survive a common cold.
Oh, wow.
So it begins to treat every single sneeze, every minor economic fluctuation or diplomatic disagreement as a lethal existential threat.
That is such a profound lens for viewing the news cycle. It really explains the constant outrage and the perpetual state of emergency we seem to live in right now.
It really does.
So let's pull all of this together and synthesize the core takeaway for you, the listener. Based on all these sources, the primary insight is that civilizations, nations, and even local institutions are rarely defeated by their enemies. They are defeated by a loss of internal coherence. External pressures only become truly existential when your own internal processes, your ability to plan, your accountability, your social trust break down.
That is the absolute crux of Chapter 7. External pressures are merely a reflection of internal strength. They become accelerants of growth when your internal processes are healthy, and they become accelerators of disorder when your internal processes are sick.
Which brings us to a tool the text calls the Diamond Diagnostic. It's a single question designed to cut through the noise, the paranoia, and the blame game.
Oh, I love this question.
The question is, are external pressures destabilizing us because they are strong or because we are weak?
Are external pressures destabilizing us because they are strong or because we are weak?
It's
a deeply uncomfortable question to ask.
It really is.
Because it forces you to look at your own capacity and your own failures, rather than just pointing fingers at the barbarians at the gate.
And I want to leave you with a provocative thought building directly on that diagnostic. Because the brilliance of the Diamond framework is that it's fractal.
Yes.
It doesn't just apply to ancient Rome or 21st century superpowers. It scales down. It applies to corporations, to local communities, and even to our own personal life.
The mechanics of coherence are the exact same at every level.
Right. So think about your own workplace or your career right now. If you feel constantly besieged by external enemies, maybe it's a rival department that always seems to be undermining your projects, or a rapidly shifting technology like AI that's threatening your industry, or even just a chaotic, toxic community environment, I want you to ask yourself that Diamond Diagnostic.
Is it possible that the external pressure isn't actually that overwhelmingly strong?
Exactly. Could it be that your own internal coherence, the trust among your team, your own daily habits and disciplines, your clarity of purpose has slowly eroded without you noticing?
Because taking a sledgehammer to the Japanese car doesn't fix the assembly line in Detroit.
Right.
Blaming the rival department doesn't fix your own team's lack of communication. It requires immense accountability to look at your own internal processes and admit that your immune system is compromised.
Before you spend all your time and energy building higher walls to keep the supposed enemies out, you might want to check if the foundation inside the building is actually crumbling. Because a properly engineered skyscraper doesn't fear the hurricane, it trusts its own steel. Look inward before you look outward. That's the lesson of the Diamond. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Take that diagnostic question with you this week, and we'll see you next time.